Okay, everyone. Hello again. This is Dr. Steve Vargo. I'm VP of Optometric Consulting with Prima Eye Group, and so happy to have you hanging out with me this evening. Welcome to Staff Training Do's and Don'ts. And staffing it's certainly one of the biggest challenges I think ODs have, and as business owners. So I think this will be interesting and relevant, and practical strategies that you can use in your own practice. Feel free to ask questions. There's a question tab somewhere on there, and we'll try to get to those at the end. So when you think of staff training, I think you naturally think of more of the mechanical aspects of it, performing the tests, verifying insurance, adjusting frames, and we tend to teach the how. We teach people how to do a job, but that doesn't necessarily translate into a motivated, engaged team. And it would be nice if it were that easy to just show somebody how to do a job and have a highly productive team. But if that were the case, I wouldn't be getting so many calls at Prima from members who are having so many issues with staffing. So I think one of the keys is really to think beyond the employee mentality, where you give someone a job, show somebody how to do a job, and then give them a paycheck. Kind of getting beyond that mindset to get the most out of people. And when you look at organizations as benchmarks companies that are known for developing talent and creating a highly productive workforce, how do they do it? How do they create get people to be motivated and have a positive attitude and take ownership over their position? And the training really goes beyond showing somebody how to do the job. What they do is they create an atmosphere where they can get the most out of their people, where people will actually volunteer their best efforts, and you really can't force that. So it's important to establish that mindset in the beginning as part of the training. So we're going to go over about 7 different ways to help sort of establish that atmosphere at your practice, that environment. And some of this will be more the pragmatic aspects of training, and some of it will be related to leadership and becoming a better leader. It's really hard to create a competent, motivated team without some leadership involved. So with that, the first thing I'll talk about is what they call the protege effect, which is really the concept that if you want to learn something new, is to teach it. And it's a great way to really to learn something new is to teach it to somebody else. They've done some research on student teachers and found that they tend to do better on tests than people who just learn things for their own benefit. And likewise, they've done research too and found that firstborn children tend to have higher IQs. And one of the things they suspect is that the firstborn tend to do more, teaching their younger siblings the ropes. So my apologies if you're not if you're a younger sibling and you're convinced that you're smarter than your firstborn. That may be the case, but in a lot of cases, the firstborn actually do have a higher IQ. One of the problems that I see with a lot of practices is that if the training aspect is not really getting absorbed, sometimes the new hire doesn't necessarily grasp the job, and the owner or the manager finds out down the road that they never really knew how to do the job in the beginning, and they've been doing it all wrong. We've actually had some tragic cases where owner found out later that an employee was billing the insurance wrong the entire time, or giving somebody the wrong information. So the entire time. So really the best way to be sure somebody truly understands something is to have them demonstrate it back to you. Once you explain something, ask them questions to make sure they understand it. Do some role play where you're the doctor or a manager, or somebody is the patient, and have the new hire do tests on you, or whatever it is that you're training them for, just to make sure that they're really grasping what you're trying to teach them. And I think on that note too, one of the best ways to learn something, we tend to learn better when we teach in chunks. In other words, kind of starting with the most important tasks that allow us to do the job. I think there's a sense, especially with new hires, to teach them everything at once, but that's not always the most practical way or effective way to learn something, and you can really tie up your staff and resources on a new hire at a time when you're not even 100% certain that they're going to be a good fit for the position that you've got them in or even the job at all. So it's typically best, we tend to learn better when we learn things in small bits. Teach people the most important aspects they need to know to do the job, and then build on that. And really, we don't, your staff does not need to necessarily know everything to be out there and go their job effectively. If you consider your own position as optometrist, how much did you learn in school? Do you actually apply toward a typical day of seeing patients? If you think about it, you learned a ton of information in school, but how much of that do you really apply to a typical day? It might be 20%, 10%, and we still manage to function and get our jobs done. So teaching, put them in a position where they have to teach you, and we tend to retain that a lot better. And then on the same note we were mentioning, try not to overwhelm the person, especially a new hire, somebody who's unfamiliar with the position, is not really familiar with the lingo. It can be pretty overwhelming initially. One of the first jobs I had, I was handed on my first day what I could best describe as a phone book of different things that I had to learn. My whole first half day was just going through this book to learn everything I needed to know. It's not practical. It's not realistic. There was no way I was going to grasp that. At some point, I was just flipping the pages to make it look like I was reading. I recognized that I was not absorbing all this information. So some of the main benefits of the protege effect is that new hires and during the training period would tend to learn things faster, retain the information, and it puts a lot less strain on your staff. And this raises the question where if we're not teaching them everything at once, how long should training actually last? And my answer to that would be forever. Well, at least as long as they're working there. I don't really think there should be an endpoint with training any more than there's really not an endpoint with ODs learning something new. We're always, at least we should be, I think, in life and in professionally and personally, always growing, always learning something new. Obviously, we continue to go to CE, and I think that same process should take place also with the staff, a constant reinvestment back into your staff. It's an aspect basically of giving people the building blocks in the beginning, assessing the progress, and then continue educating them. Educating at this point might even be a better term than training. If all they know is the mechanical aspects of the job, that's not going to be that impressive to the staff. If you've ever walked into a small business and you recognize that the employees or the team is very competent and knowledgeable, how does that make you feel about the business that you're in? It gives you a sense of confidence, a sense of trust. You don't feel like you have to ask the owner or the manager everything, and that really takes a lot of work off you also and your managers if they don't have to, if the staff can deal with a lot of the things through that constant education that you're giving them. They're able to deal with a lot of the issues that would come up with patients. A quick story, and I like to tell this story because it's a story of how a well-trained, knowledgeable employee led to me spending more money. There's a place, and I think they're a chain. I don't know how far they go, but it's a place called Fleet Feet, and they are known for their just a very knowledgeable staff. And it's not your typical shoe store. When you walk in, and I've got some back problems, long story short, so when you walk in, they really analyze your gait, how you walk, the bone structure of your feet, and they make a lot of recommendations based on all of this onto what kind of shoe they recommend. So I spent a lot more on shoes and orthopedic inserts into these shoes than I ever would have, just based on this employee giving me all this information. Very knowledgeable, very competent, very able to answer my questions, and it was impressive. And I had no problem spending more money than I ever have before on footwear. So yeah, it's very important with the training not to really have an endpoint, but just keep investing back into your staff. Some opportunities for that could be sending staff off to continue education. There's online courses you could take, having frame reps do demos or presentations. You could do presentations during your staff meetings. I had a friend of mine who's a podiatrist, and he used to have his staff write a monthly newsletter, and they had to do the research. He would give them a topic, they would have to do the research, write it. He would, of course, read it and edit it and provide feedback, but it was a chance for his staff to learn something new. And some of the opportunities I had to educate staff was very informal. It might just be showing them a picture of diabetic Rett on a, off an Optos photo, or explaining to a tech what the eye pressure actually means and how that relates to glaucoma. And I always got excited to hear them educate the staff. I thought that left a very favorable impression educate the patients. So I thought that left a very favorable impression with the patients. And then systems, basically, by default, we all have systems. It's just our way of doing things. But the problem I see that in many practices, it's not consistent or repeatable. And one of the problems with training is that there tends to be a fair amount of inconsistency in how people are trained and how they do their job, which unfortunately tends to translate into uncertainty for the new hires. Human error can creep in there, and the staff can ultimately end up operating in a way that's not aligned with the goals and the vision of the practice. So one of the best models of systems, businesses that use systems, would really be franchises. And if you think, let's just take McDonald's, for example. An employee who's being trained at McDonald's in Des Moines is going to be trained the same way as an employee who's being trained at McDonald's in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And if that employee in Fort Wayne, Indiana doesn't work out, it's going to be very easy to train a new hire. These are transferable skills. And what they do is they teach the systems that they've found to be most successful for what they want to accomplish. So systems are basically, they're efficient. They can get people up to speed quickly. They're productive because basically the business has observed the most efficient, productive activities, and they're teaching everyone that method, and they're transferable. You don't have to reinvent the wheel with every new hire. So it's basically about observing and finding out what works and what doesn't, and doing more of what works and stop doing the things that aren't adding value. So maybe just an example of a practical approach is setting up different systems in each department. And just some simple examples might be at your front desk is greeting everyone who walks in the door. And it sounds like a very simple thing, but something as simple as that can create a very good first impression. And that's something that if you find that works, it creates a good first impression, gets the experience off on good footing, that would be something that you teach every new hire to do that. Kind of like Potbellies, if you've ever been there. You can't sneak into Potbellies. Somebody's going to say hi to you. And it really does make a very good first impression. So in your optical, maybe every patient is told about the 50% discount on the second pair. So these become these subsystems, we'll call them, become your way of doing things, and they get taught and transferred to the new hires. So you may have heard the phrase before, it's manage systems, not people, which may be a little oversimplistic, but when you really think about it, it is easier to manage systems that are built on consistent, repeatable activities as opposed to managing people who tend to be more inconsistent and unreliable. So this can certainly have an impact on your training and how you train new hires as you bring new people on. So it helps define the procedures for every activity, helps keep track of the details, and it helps manage the staff's expectations. So it's not the end of the webinar, but I put that on there because this tends to be a spot where, for a lot of practices, training ends, if we've even made it this far. And so far, really all we've done is show people how to do the job. But we really need to communicate, if you want to get the most out of people, why they need to do the job. What is the vision of your practice? Where are you going? How is the new hire expected to contribute to that? And it's basically clarifying the purpose of the job. And this is an area where this can be the difference maker between somebody who just feels like they're coming in to do a task for a paycheck and actually feels like they have a sense of purpose with the position that they're in. If I'll throw a gym analogy out there, or a health club analogy. If you ask somebody who goes to a health club, why do you go to the health club? They would never say, I go to the health club to move heavy objects and to run in place. That's how you exercise, but that's not why they go to the gym. Why they go to the gym is to look better, to improve their health, to have less stress. And that's more inspiring. It gets people out of bed in the morning. So how can you create that in a practice? And this will be a bit of a prelude to the rest of the webinar. A few ways to really start to establish purpose in a job is one is to keep score of the progress, set goals, get new hires, get your team to visualize where you're going and not get so bogged down with the day-to-day tasks. Basically, instilling a sense of ownership. Typically, when I see somebody who's very good at what they do and very engaged in their position, they tend to have a sense of ownership and pride over what they're doing. Also, giving people a chance to get involved, a chance to contribute, giving them a voice in the practice. And this last one here, collaboration, is especially relevant to the millennial generation, which may drive a lot of people nuts, but they don't want to be told what to do. Then this is especially true of the millennial generation. They want to be a part of something. So I think this is probably the team we want. This is the staff we want. They're motivated, self-disciplined, a unified team. But in a lot of practices, this is what you get. This team has no clear purpose or vision. Their input is not valued or solicited. It's never communicated to them what the vision or goals of the practice are, and they don't really see the bigger picture. It's just about the day-to-day tasks, and they're just coming in. Basically, they're doing just enough to not get fired. And I think I'm sure at some point we've all felt this way. We've all had a job where we just showed up for a paycheck and we spent the day looking at the clock, wondering when 5 o'clock would get here. So clarifying a purpose really involves communicating to your staff, here's our vision, you're an important part of that, and here's how you're going to help us get there. And on that same note, one of a very good way to establish a purpose and establish what you're working toward, basically, is to track and measure the progress. Especially with new hires, this takes the emotion out of it. It's really important to clarify expectations for staff, for new hires, and setting goals is a good way to do this. In an interesting Harvard study, they tracked a graduating class, and of all the people in the class, they found that 3% had written goals, 13% had goals, but they weren't written down, and 84% had no goals at all. And 10 years later, as part of this study, they went back, and they found that the 13% that had goals but they weren't written down made twice as much money as the 84% with no goals at all. Interestingly, that 3% that had written goals at graduation and made 10 times the amount of money as the people who had no goals when they graduated. So setting goals, it's not only a powerful growth tool for your practice, but it's also a very motivating tool for your staff. And just to go over a scenario of goals and what goals might be most important. There's something I like to call WIG goals, W-I-G, and that's a short for wildly important goals. And ask yourself, what are the 2 or 3 things? It can even be one thing that's the most important goal in your practice, and it may be it may be revenue. Maybe you're a $700,000 practice and you want to grow 10%, and that is your goal. That's your wildly important goal. These are typically you don't want to go more than 2 or 3 things because it's really harder to focus on several different goals. We really want to think about what are the most important things we need to accomplish that's going to put us on the path for where we want to go. And these are typically things that you could accomplish within about 6 months to 2 years. Once you've determined that, then determine what the critical activities are that would have the greatest impact on these major goals. So this could be 5 or 6 different things. We call these lead activities. These could be things like multiple pair sales, percentage of contact lens patients. Maybe it's customer service. You can, if you've ever heard of the Net Promoter Score, it's a way to quantify your customer service. So find 5 or 6 different lead activities that the staff can actually influence. And then you could designate different goals to different departments, but what you really want is everyone working together. And then keep score, keep a scoreboard. And written goals tend to be much more effective when they're written down. If you are at a sporting event and you want to see if your team is winning, how you're doing, what are you going to do? You're going to look up at the scoreboard. So if you have goals in the practice, and keep a scoreboard somewhere, something that's visual. Keep it in the break room. Keep it somewhere where somebody's going to see. Make it very easy to understand. Think of a bar chart that shows where you're at now against the monthly or quarterly goals. And this can help create accountability. Ask your staff to report on the progress, offer feedback, and it's also a chance for staff to hold each other accountable. You know, it's easy for one person to perceive that they're working harder than another, but when you have goals, when you have numbers, you really can't hide from the results. So essentially, goals are a good way to unify your team, and written goals, a good way to unify your team. You're working toward common goals, and to communicate to the staff how their efforts are contributing to the success of the practice. And if you use these goals as a basis for raises, bonuses, promotions, it's also a good way to show your staff how their efforts can contribute to their own success. What you don't want to do is overcomplicate the process. We don't want to make it difficult to understand. I've seen some goals and bonus systems that were just very complex, unnecessarily complex, and much more difficult for the staff to understand and process how their efforts were really contributing to these metrics, these lead activities. We don't want to create unhealthy competition also. It's okay to have fun. This should be fun, motivating. If you've got these goals, monthly goals, quarterly goals, you can have parties around it if you reach your goals. Take the staff out to dinner. I've even seen a business that had a funny ritual of whoever had the most sales for that month, the rest of the team would crowd around him and bow down and say, "We're not worthy, we're not worthy." So it just created a fun atmosphere for the rest of the workforce, and it unified everybody. So give staff permission to contribute their own ideas. And when you give staff goals and give them a chance to contribute to the process and give them a stake in the outcome, that's where ownership over the position really starts. And we go back to training new hires. Part of this comes down to establishing the culture of your practice, and it's easier to do that in the beginning with new hires, is to establish this culture, this mindset, this winning mindset of of getting to a certain point, reaching goals, making progress, pushing forward. So this, it's a good establish this from the beginning, make this process part of the staff training. And then obviously some of the benefits, obviously constant improvement. You want to be moving in that forward direction. This again demonstrates a strategic link between the staffs or let's call it the new hire, even because we're talking about staff training, their contributions and their efforts. It helps them visualize that link between what their efforts and the success of the practice and their own success actually, and goals. When done in a healthy way that brings everyone together trying to reach common goals, it can really unite the team. This one is, I think, especially important. I think what I see as one of the biggest factors, even when I was practicing, one of the biggest factors that contributes to poor morale is staff feels like their input is not valued and that nobody cares what they think. What I also see a lot is this could be the owner, it could be a manager, but somebody plays the role of the lone genius. It is somebody who recognizes, let's say, for example, there's a problem with the practice, so I'm going to go off and figure out the answer, and then everybody's just going to fall in line. Well, not everybody necessarily agrees that this is the best way to do things. An alternative approach, and one that tends to bring people into the mix more and maybe gets people to volunteer their own efforts in a more productive manner, is, let's say there's a problem with the practice. Let's say it's customer service, patients not being seen on time, for example, and then bringing your whole team in to brainstorm with the team different ideas to fix the problem, giving them permission to offer their suggestions, giving them permission to debate strategies. This not only empowers the staff, but it also removes one of the biggest frustrations they tend to have, which is feeling like their input is not valued in the practice. This could certainly be part of staff meetings. Frequent staff meetings are very beneficial. Encourage, in fact, require staff to contribute ideas and suggestions for improving the practice. Open communication can really go a long way toward getting staff engaged in their job and avoiding some of the conflict that practices tend to have. And then lastly here, we tend to, again, where we kind of started is with staff training, we tend to focus on the hard skills, but there's also what they call the soft skills, which soft skills go along, basically contribute more to patient satisfaction than just knowing the mechanical aspects of a job. Soft skills are showing concern when a patient is talking about their eye problems. It's working well with the rest of the staff. It's how you handle patient complaints. And sometimes what we need to do in the realm of soft skills is untrain people. Staff will tend to, if they've had bad habits from a previous job, they can very easily bring that into the new job. So sometimes we need to untrain. People tend to bring their past work experiences into the new job, and that may not necessarily be the way that your practice operates. So leading by example is one of the best ways to communicate these soft skills. People will tend to adapt to the culture that you create. So they're going to look for cues from you and your management especially on how you conduct yourselves. And it's really the little things. Nobody's going to remember that the technician got the air puff on the first try or that they billed their insurance correctly. People will remember that your staff rectified a problem or shown concern with an eye problem or made their child who was nervous about their first eye exam feel at ease. So that, again, this sort of goes back to culture building, but it's important to establish this with the new hires, that, again, this is the way we do things here, and a lot of that will come through the example that you lead and your upper management leads. And on that same note is not confusing the message. you can talk about great customer service, but if the leaders of your practice get annoyed every time a patient comes back with an RX check, that's the message that you're going to convey. So just make sure you have a consistent, aligned message with how do you want your practice to operate on customer service, how treating patients clinically, and then make sure that you are basically a good example of how to do that. So credibility is it really defines how you conduct yourself and the culture you create. So this should definitely be a baseline for new hires, establishing this how you conduct yourself and how you want other people to conduct themselves when they're in the working in your practice. So, well, just to conclude here, the 7 things we talked about is the protege effect. Have your staff teach you how to do things. Make sure that they understand what they're doing and that they're doing it right. Teach them a little bit at a time. Teach them the most important things first. Make sure they understand that and keep adding a little bit more and build on that, especially with new hires or people who haven't worked in this field before. Ease them into it. Just get them the most essential activities they need to know to do the job, and then just keep educating them, keep training them, but make sure that they understand what they're doing, the most important aspects. Never stop training them. Constantly refine systems. Constantly be looking at how your practice operates in each different department, from front desk to pre-testing, to even the exam part, to the optical, to checkout, and constantly be thinking, how could we make this more efficient? How could we be more productive? What could we stop doing? I mean, a big part of time management and office flow and efficiency is to figure out what you can eliminate and what you can stop doing. How can we simplify things? And then build that into the training process. Don't recreate the wheel every time you have to train a new employee. Giving staff a purpose, giving them a reason to come to work, not just giving them a bunch of tasks to do for a paycheck, but actually creating that sense of purpose on the job. Setting goals, giving them goals help to quantify and give staff endpoint. I won't say an endpoint, but a target basically of where you're going. Instead of just coming in, doing the job, you want staff to be able to understand this is where we're going. We're going there as a team, and here's how you're contributing to that. Giving staff a voice. I don't know of too many successful organizations that were built on one person, that were built on that lone genius. Usually when you look at successful organizations, they're a product of a successful team working together. So let staff contribute. You may find that they have some great ideas that you didn't consider. Some staff will have strengths where you have weaknesses, but encourage them to get involved. In fact, require them to get involved with the growth and the forward movement of the practice, and then teaching the soft skills, which are really what drives the patient satisfaction. It's not just knowing how to do the job, but it's a sense of empathy with patients. It's basically the customer service aspect of it. So make sure that's you're leading by example in how you want your staff to conduct themselves around patients. So basically, teaching someone how to do a job is the easy part. The secret is really in motivating staff. It's creating an environment where you can get the most out of your staff. So that is part training and it's part leadership. I don't know how to create a really competent, knowledgeable, motivated staff without integrating some level of leadership into this. So if you do have a competent, knowledgeable, motivated staff, it can really be the difference, though, between a practice that thrives and a practice that stagnates. And that actually brings us to the conclusion. So I would just take a second to thanks for hanging out with me tonight. I'll hang around here for a few minutes. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to. If there's a button on there, feel free to ask. Yeah, somebody asked if you'd be allowed to listen to the seminar, and they are recorded, so they will be available. I believe all our webinars are recorded, so they're always available to hear again. You're welcome. Thank you, Linda. Feel free also to, my email is svargo, S-V-A-R-G-O, at primaeyegroup.com. So, yeah, feel free to shoot an email anytime. All right, guys. I'll give it another minute or two if anyone's got any questions, and then again, appreciate your time, taking a little bit of time out of your evening to hang out here. All right, guys. I'm gonna log out here, but thanks again. If you have any questions you think of, just feel free to give me an email, give me a call. Hope you have a good evening, and thanks again for joining me tonight.